Brothers and sisters, I greet you with the greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to a new episode of Contemporary Fiqh Issues. We have with us today our special guest, Sheikh Asim bin Luqman al-Hakim. Sheikh Asim is a well-known da'i who has traveled extensively to many countries across the world and has been the leading khatib and imam of a masjid in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia for the last 21 years. Sheikh Asim, welcome.
Jazakumullah khairan, thank you for having me.
Barakallahu feekum. Sheikh Asim, for many Muslims today, it is very difficult for them. They find themselves dealing with issues that aren't necessarily dealt with directly in the Quran and in the Sunnah. We went to the street to find out the opinion of the common Muslim on this issue of fiqh al-nawazil or contemporary fiqh, to see what they had to say about it. Let's go to the footage. Allah Ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala.
What do you know about fiqh al-nawazil?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What do I know about fiqh al-nawazil? Fiqh al-nawazil is about a methodology in Islam where we can deal with emergency situations, like in wudu, how we can take a wudu in desert, whereas there's no water present in desert. There's also many things. I think I know about it, not much.
Fiqh nawazil? No, I don't know anything.
Fiqh nawazil? Sorry, I don't know. Fiqh nawazil? Actually, there's no much thing I know about fiqh nawazil. But what I know is fiqh nawazil is about Islam give us some chance in emergency case, such as a pregnant woman. It is not obligatory for her to continue her fasting if she scared about the baby's condition. Allah Ta'ala, Allah
Ta'ala. And welcome back, Sheikh Jazakallah khairan. As we can see, many of the Muslims equate fiqh al-nawazil or contemporary fiqh issues with issues of dururi or issues of necessity. Could you please elaborate on this issue, especially this term that is new to many of us as Muslims?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala abdihi wa rasulihi al-Amin, Nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. This is quite new to a lot of the Muslims, as it's a branch of science that not a lot of Muslims know about, simply because it is not addressed to the mass or to the public. Only a handful of scholars who are qualified to discuss these things know about it. Yet, this branch of fiqh is very important, because we know that jurisprudence or Islamic fiqh is divided into a number of categories. So there is the fiqh that deals with forms of worship, such as purification, prayers, fasting. And there is another part of fiqh that deals with transactions, and so on. Fiqh al-nawazil is the understanding of the nazila, which is the singular of nawazil, which is a plural name of it. And if you look at the origin of the word nazila, it comes from the word descending. So it is engaged, it is focused on studying issues that are happening in contemporary times, and they require an Islamic ruling. So there are things that happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Quran either answered them, addressed them, or the Prophet ﷺ himself gave the verdict or the Islamic ruling on them. But Islam is a religion that's being revived on and on. It's a living religion. It's not something that is suitable for a particular time or a specific location. It's reoccurring. Things that are reoccurring need to be addressed over and over again. And that is why we need to strive to know the ruling of the Sharia on a particular incident. This is where an-nawazil come in. And there is this terminology of fiqh an-nawazil, which is a general and broad sense of an-nawazil and looking at them. And there is a specific one, which is an-nawazil al-fiqhiyya, which talks only about the incidents that deal with fiqh. So what's the difference? It's very simple. Fiqh an-nawazil, it makes you understand how to deal and treat things that are contemporary. Whether they're religious, they can be related to fiqh, they can be related to aqeedah. For example, the new sects, the new creeds and ideologies that are reoccurring or happening for the first time. So this is a nazila that has to be studied thoroughly, and then the verdict would be given. There are things that take place in language, and it's also considered to be a nazila. There are innovations, inventions that are not related to Islam. So these are all called nawazil, and you have to understand how to deal and treat them. What we're focusing on is an-nawazil al-fiqhiyya. And if you look at the word an-nawazil itself, you can look at it from a number of directions. For example, there are, as I've mentioned earlier, looking at them in respect to topics. So is it fiqh, or is it linguistic, or is it science, or is it creed and aqeedah? You can look at it in terms of its importance, because there is a nazila that it is extremely important that you have to be very careful when tackling. For example, if it's political, or if it's relating to the welfare of the whole ummah, with respect to when it's about an individual. So this is a nazila, and the other one is also a nazila, but it's a different weight and size. Reoccurrence. You can look at it from the angle of how many times that has happened. There are nawazil that only concern a limited number of people, like political asylum, for example, like seeking the nationality or the citizenship of a non-Muslim country. This is addressing a limited number of people. But there are also something that happens a lot to Muslims, like praying in the airplane. This is something that did not take place at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, so we have to give a particular ruling to in this regard. There are things that happen in between. We need to look into them, such as bank accounts, credit cards, etc. So it depends on how you look at it. And of course, the final angle, or one of the angles that you can look at this topic as well, is whether it has an origin that took place at the Salaf's time, or it's completely new.
Salaf meaning earlier generations?
Yes, that's exactly what I meant. Because, for example, if you look at Sperm's Bank, they never had anything, they never anticipated having anything like this. So this is something that's completely new. But if you look at some forms of transactions, such as Bay' al-Murabaha, which is a Murabaha transaction, and it's a sort of Islamic financing. Well, this had an origin to it at the time of our predecessors, but it's not exactly as they discussed it. So we have to look into these things, dissect it, analyze it, and then give the ruling of it.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. So what we understand then is that fiqh nawazil or nawazil fiqhiyya is, in general, it's a contemporary issue. It's something where we look at modern day issues and we're trying to understand how Islam can deal with these issues, because there's no direct ruling found in the Quran or in the Sunnah. How does this fall back on the fundamentals of the religion, or looking at the fundamentals when dealing with deciphering these rulings, when the scholars go and issue a ruling, how does it go back to the fundamentals? Can you please explain for us?
Okay, that's a good question. We have to understand, first of all, that it's exactly what you have just mentioned that made these issues come up to the top. This technological advancement, this industrial boom that we are living calls for new things. And these new things can only be looked at from this branch of fiqh, because it did not have any direct link in the Quran or in the Sunnah directing us to them. And that is why scholars had to put a lot of effort trying to figure out how to give the ruling on such topics and issues. And I believe, I don't know if you share this with me, but I believe that this shows us how strong Islam is and how compatible it is to all times and to all places. I believe that it is a great manifestation that Islam is appropriate for all times and locations.
Barakallahu feekum, ya Shaykh. I don't think there's any Muslim that can disagree with that statement. We'll continue in just a moment, inshallah, after we go to the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allah Ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala.
اللهم إني أسألك الفردوس الأعلى من الجنة. اللهم إني أسألك الفردوس الأعلى من الجنة.
Allah Ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Contemporary Fiqh Issues in Islam. We were just discussing right before the break with Sheikh Asim bin Luqman al-Hakim. Sheikh Asim, we were discussing the issue of how Islam is a universal religion and it's for all times and place. And one of the miracles of Islam is that it can adapt with an essential look at its fundamentals when addressing any issue, no matter how big or how small. How do Muslims deal with these new issues, these contemporary issues when they come about? Is there a procedure to follow? Is there certain steps that we have to look towards?
I completely agree with the concept, as you mentioned before the break, that there's no Muslim who does not believe that Islam is suitable for every time and place. I may disagree with this statement because I know that with the influence of different ideologies